make sure I get his name right. So it's Glenn Fearon?
Fern.
Fern. Okay, pronounced Fern, see, get it wrong even though. But Glenn is very much a sovereignist, but he also has a lot of material about how to let the authorities know who you are and what your role is. And I think it's really timely that this comes about, and he has got documents that he's filed and been successful with that he's going to make available to you after, should you decide to want them. For templates, obviously you would have to change them slightly to do your own thing. But without further ado, I think I should just let Glenn take over, and we'd like you to save your questions until the last 45 minutes. We're going to be here till 11, and so at quarter past we'll start taking the questions. So if you could just let them go through things, and then write your questions down for later. Thanks.
I would like to say that, just to clarify, I am Glenn Winningham of the House of Fern. Now, does anybody know why I use House of Fern? You do? Why?
Yes, because House of Fern refers to your family, not to your last name.
That's right. That's the family of Fern. And a good example of that is the Queen. Does anybody know what the Queen's last name is?
House of Windsor.
That's right. Most people don't know. And the reason is the family name is never mentioned. And I got to tell you that but what I'm going to show you today is a way to use administrative procedure, because I could show you in the court cases, we're all sovereign. Everybody is. And they know it. But they have what they view to be you involved in a contract with them. And that's why they're doing the things they're doing. And so what you have to do, we've all given them evidence to think that we're not sovereign, okay? Like, for example, our parents registered our birth, okay? At common law, the way that's supposed to be done is there's supposed to be a big family Bible, and it's supposed to be in the back of the family Bible. And that's how the birth is recorded. But our parents, because the government made a color of law code that really doesn't apply to anybody, our parents went down and registered our birth. So there's a little bit of evidence to think that there's a corporation running around there with our name on it. And then, because the government went and passed a law that says all persons have to get a driver's license, or all persons have to get a social insurance number, we went around and did that too. And so we've given them all of this evidence to say that we're a person, and we have to defeat that evidence. We have to defeat that because all of their evidence is prima facie, okay? At first look, it's based on presumption, and all of this, these terms that I'm using, prima facie, presumption, those are all evidence that we're under martial law and have been for decades. And I can show you court cases that talk about that too. And so, what I'm going to show you tonight is a procedure where you can take away their right to presume and put them in the position where you basically start building a case against them, and they know it. They know that that's exactly what you're doing, and you're putting them in a position that they either better honor their oath of office or you're going to have them in jail. And if you do it right, if it's done well, then that's where they'll wind up. They'll be in jail because all you got to do is you don't even have to go to a judge and swear out a complaint. You send a registered letter to the Attorney General, and I'll show you. Ultimately, something will happen. I guarantee you. It's happened to me so many times. They'll never ever admit, oh yeah, you caught us with our hands in the cookie jar, or we committed a felony. That'll never happen. But all of a sudden, the guy will resign, or he'll just disappear, or any number of things will happen. And I've seen it happen so many times, and we'll go through this here. So, anyways, I guess we'll get started. Just a little background about me. This is my stomping grounds. As you can see, Sovereignty International is currently located in Fort Worth, Texas. I happen to be, well, a couple of years ago I lived in Texas. I still maintain, that's a private mailbox, by the way. The only address I ever give out is a private mailbox. And I don't tell them that either. And under postal regulations, all persons had to put down a PMB for a private mailbox. Well, I sent a registered letter to the Postmaster General, and I said, I'm not a person and I'm not putting PMB, and they don't have a problem with it. It's amazing how that works. And so I don't put PMB, I just put down number 437, or I might put down suite number 437, or I'll put down whatever I want, but it won't be PMB, I guarantee you. Anyways, I was born at Peace River. I went to high school in Raymond. I spent about 8 years here in Edmonton. I was in the Canadian Armed Forces for 4 years. I was based in the mail. So all over northern part of Edmonton. I was all over there, but I was all over Edmonton. Having lived here for 8 years. I lived about 8 years in Calgary, and then in about 1982, I went down to the States, and been basically down there ever since, except for about 5 years that I was in Ontario. I do aerospace engineering consulting. I've worked in aviation for all my life. I started out as a mechanic. Matter of fact, that's what I was doing at the mail. I was an airframe technician. And I deal with law and regulations as far as aviation is concerned all day, every day. And that's all I do. And right now, I do consulting work. I'm actually in between contracts. And I'm currently negotiating with FedEx in Memphis, Tennessee for a contract down there. But who knows? I turned down a contract recently in southern Germany, about 20 miles from the Swiss border. And sometimes I kick myself for that, but the Euro tanked shortly after that, so I'm kind of glad. But being close to Switzerland would be nice too, because I could open myself up some Swiss bank accounts, do all sorts of things over there. But so anyways, that's the way it goes. There's another contract around the corner, and I travel all over. So anyways, so this is where I'm from anyways. And this is, I don't know if anybody knows Murray Govro.
Oh, yeah.
He's my brother.
Well, I don't see the resemblance.
Recognize the resemblance.
He's, my last name's Fern, okay? What happened is my dad died when I was 12 years old, my mother got remarried, and I got adopted, and I never did change my name back. One of my brothers did, that got adopted, but I never did. But so he's my brother, and Gary Govro, you know all the Govros. But so anyways, so this is my old stomping grounds. And my family has a fine tradition of being rabble-rousers, okay? My grandfather was an editorialist with the Edmonton Journal, and he used to like to stir the pot with the government over the Indians and stuff like that. So I consider it a fine tradition in my family to like to stir that pot, And as far as your student loan is concerned, I'd just like to tell you that it was paid the moment you signed that promissory note. But you're going to have to convince them of that. Anyways, anyways, I guess we ought to move along here. Let's see. There we go. Okay, so I actually have a presentation on sovereignty, on the fact on the court cases that say that we're all a nation of kings and queens. And but I'm not going to go into that today because we just don't have time. I'm hoping that we'll be able to get through. I got two presentations. One's on asserting your sovereignty. So I guess you're going to have to. I don't know if everybody here considers themselves to be sovereign. You are. If you don't understand it, this is one of the things that when I've been learning about this. What happened is about in the 90s, in the early 90s, this guy come up to me. Where was I? I was in Arizona, and he come up to me and he says to me, he starts talking about the two classes of citizens, and I told him he's nuts. I told him, you're crazy. You don't know what you're talking about. And he brought out these court cases, and the court cases were talking about it. And I thought, this is just the most fantastic thing there is. And I had to start looking into it. And so, like you, I'm a sincere seeker of the truth. And I've always been that way. And so, anyways, so what happened is if you don't understand that you're sovereign, well, that's a lot of people don't. I mean, there's masses of people out there that don't know who they are, okay? And there's probably people in this room that don't know who you are. And that's okay. But, so I guess in the discussions that we'll have here, you'll have to take my word for some things. And let me encourage you to do research to find out who you are, because you really can't, you have to not only just talk the talk, you gotta walk the walk, you gotta be the king. You gotta be the king. And this process here is a way that you can assert yourself and basically put them in their place, because they're all our servants. And once they understand that, there's a lot of good and honorable people that are in government. There's some criminals out there too, but what do you do when there's criminals? You root them out and you prosecute them. And that's what you need to do. But you need to understand who you are first. So anyways, so we're going to go about who you are, how to assert your rights, and a procedure to build a case against our public servants that will stand up in court. You know, I do lawsuits all the time. I was in the Supreme Court here probably, a couple months ago when I got the dismissal. They always get dismissed. But it's amazing what happens in the cases, especially if you understand the law and how the law works. Because the U.S. Department of Justice, or I call them the U.S. Department of so-called justice in my case, they waive their right to respond. And if you understand what that means in a court case, they admit everything. So what happened is, under the U.S. Constitution, the Supreme Court has to have a controversy to rule on. And if they waive their right to respond, there's no controversy. So they had no choice but to dismiss it. And so, anyways, that's the second time that's happened to me, by the way. So, anyways, to move on, the procedure is how you can build a case against our public servants, and they're going to know that that's exactly what you're doing. And that is exactly what you want, okay? Because really, I don't want to put my public servants in jail. I just want them to protect me. That's what they're supposed to be doing, to protect my rights. That's all I want. I don't have any vindictive agenda against my public servants. I'd rather not. I just want them to honor their oath of office and protect my rights. That's all. And so, anyways, that's the whole idea of what this is about. And this I already went through. So we know about that. Yes, in the mid-1990s, I was working in Toronto for Bombardier on a contract, and I met Patrick Ellis. Has anybody ever heard of Patrick Ellis? He's kind of well known. Okay, somehow.
I know somebody related to him.
Somehow. You're related to him?
I know somebody related to him.
Oh, okay. Anyways, he taught me about court procedure and how to file a lawsuit. And I filed several lawsuits in Ontario. It's kind of interesting because, and I probably got it up here, but when I filed those lawsuits, like within weeks on the national news, there was an announcement from the government saying that this would not be tolerated. What my lawsuit was all about, eh? Now, of course, my lawsuit got dismissed, okay? But see, they always have these little technical rules and stuff, you know? And they really, if you understand that we're under martial law, all the courts are martial law. There's no justice in those courts. And that's why the second part of my presentation is going to be on the ultimate remedy for all of this problem. And that's setting up our own de jure government, okay? And essentially taking back control of the government. Because right now it's completely de facto, and they're doing whatever they want, and the evidence is all over the place, you know, of what they're doing. You know, they seem to think that we're their property and they can do what they want. And we need to put them in their place and just educate them about, you know, we've been asleep at the wheel for decades. You know, we're going and registering, getting social insurance numbers and driver's licenses and all this stuff. And now when a few people say enough, well, they line them up and put them in jail, you know. And so we got to train them. We got to train our public servants and get them straightened out as to who really has the power in this country. And so, anyways, that was what I learned from Patrick Ellis in Toronto, and I've been doing that ever since. I filed several lawsuits in Ontario, been to the Ontario Court of Appeals twice, filed numerous lawsuits in the U.S. I've taken them to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 9th Circuit, the 5th Circuit, the 2nd Circuit, and the D.C. Circuit. So, I mean, that's at least 4 lawsuits. Actually, there's more than that, because I went to the 9th Circuit twice, 5th Circuit once, 2nd Circuit once, D.C. Circuit once. So that's 5 times I went to the Court of Appeals, and twice to the Supreme Court. I've taken 2 cases to the Supreme Court. In 2004, it was recommended to me to get some Rice McLeod's material. Rice McLeod is he's still alive, but he's getting on in years, and he's not himself. But he's the former Attorney General for the Republic of Texas. And I'm sure you all know that Texas was a republic way back when, right? Well, I bet you're shocked to hear that there's an Attorney General for the Republic of Texas that's still alive. But you have to, see, in order for any sovereign nation to become part of another sovereign nation, there has to be a treaty of annexation that's done, okay? And the Republic of Texas actually did do a treaty of annexation. And they sent it to the US Senate for approval and adoption. Well, the US Senate didn't approve it and adopt it. They shelved it. They did a House Joint Resolution, but that's not an approval and adoption. So what happened, what that means is the Republic of Texas still exists. And in fact, there's been court cases that went to the World Court, and the World Court says we don't have jurisdiction. And if you understand the World Court, they're a court that administers disputes between the corporate governments of the world. Okay, so they wouldn't have jurisdiction because the Republic of Texas is a de jure government. And so, anyways, then there was a case that went to the Texas Supreme Court. And the Texas Supreme Court said that the state of Texas has to do what the Republic of Texas tells them. I'm serious. And there's even statutes in the state of Texas that tells them that they have to do what the Republic of Texas tells them. And so a group of people, see, the Republic of Texas was there, it just wasn't being used. It was like dormant. And so a group of people got together and they went and brought the Republic of Texas out of dormancy. And what they did is they held an election, they elected a president, they organized it's called not an interim, oh man, I can't think of the terminology. Anyways, it was a kind of like an interim government before the real government, and they set up the Republic of Texas government, and they're still operating it. And in fact, I was the Speaker of the House of Representatives for a year and a half, and they hold Congress. We get together every week, every month, and have meetings, pass legislation, and after we're done with our legislation, then we serve it on the governor, and then you watch the state of Texas start doing what we tell them to do. It's amazing how that works. But this is we're talking about black letter law. It's called black letter law. It's called real law, okay? The government here operates under color of law, okay? Color of law is law that looks like law, acts like law, but it's not law. So, and that's where color of law is based on presumption. Remember, we were talking about these terminologies? Color of law is based on prima facie evidence, okay? Prima facie means at first look, okay? In other words, it's a contract. You see what I'm saying? And so, anyways, Rice McLeod had a very down-to-earth way of explaining the law that really put it all into perspective for me. I knew that there was something wrong, but I just couldn't put all the pieces together. And he explained it so that I really started to understand it a lot better. And he helped me to really see what was going on. And then it tells you I was elected to this as the Speaker of the House of Representatives. And then I moved to New York. Well, close. Okay. Over the years, I've learned that we're under martial law. That all courts are corporate commercial courts in business to make a profit. There's no justice in those courts. But that all courts are banks. They're actually banks, and what happens is when you file those filing fees, when you pay those filing fees, a portion of that goes to pay errors and omissions insurance. So that judge really couldn't care. He couldn't care less about what he decides because the insurance will cover it if he's a mistake. So he couldn't care less. And what they do is they leverage those filing fees too. So what happens is that if the filing fee is $200, well, you figure 30 times, right? So then that's $6,000 that they create out of thin air. And then the judge gets a royalty and the prosecutor gets a royalty. Everybody gets a royalty except the guy that's the victim. And the judges, most judges retire millionaires because of these royalties. Anyways, so, and I've read articles on the Harvard Law Review, okay, which is a very prestigious legal magazine.
I like it.
I've read articles in there about the judges, the royalties that judges get. from martial law court cases, because that's what they are, is Admiralty Maritime Law court cases. Now, you gotta understand that under some circumstances, there's nothing wrong with that, okay? Say you have two vessels at sea, and they're disputing about something, right? And so they take it into court, and they want the court to resolve their issue. Well, heck, I don't have a problem with the judge getting a piece of the action because he's just resolving their dispute for them. There's nothing wrong with that. But where the problem comes is when the government passes a color of law statute that says that all persons have to get a social insurance number, and then everybody runs out to get one, and then the government's all confused because they see all these corporations running around on the streets and everywhere and start treating us like corporations. That's where I get a problem. And that's exactly what's happening. And I've won court cases based on that. I've won, I'll tell you about it, it'll come up. Anyways, now when you bring an action in the courts, okay, and that's why I bring, there's no justice in those courts, and I tell them that too. And matter of fact, what I tell them when I was in the Supreme Court is I told them I didn't care what they did or said, because I wanted it on the record, because I wanted to see some benchers, okay, and I didn't say who the benchers were. You can't do that, that's a threat then, you see what I'm saying? But I said I wanted to see some benchers do that little dance they do at the end of a common law rope. And anyways, I get really belligerent. I get really belligerent. And I just, you know, if you read my documents, you'll see that I just really get belligerent in the documents. But, you know, they're criminals. They are flat out criminals. They're thieves, they're robbers, they're putting people in prison so they can get a royalty and live high off the hog. You know, I'll tell you, if the people understood what was happening, there'd be a revolution overnight. But, so anyways, so what'll happen when you bring a lawsuit, and that's actually what's happened in my case, where if they're attacking me, I'll use my administrative procedure, and then if worse comes to worse, I'll file a lawsuit against them. And when I file a lawsuit, the problem will go away, guaranteed, okay? And sometimes most of the time my administrative procedure works, okay? But in the last case, in the worst case scenario where it doesn't work, then I file a lawsuit and I just dump on them. And you know, the problem goes away then. And I'm sure they get slapped behind the scenes. And no matter what, even anytime I file a lawsuit, I guarantee you that there's phone calls made, there's people that get slapped. And you know, really that's all I want. You know, the case gets dismissed. It'd be nice to get, you know, $100 million, which is what I'm asking for, you know, or 10 billion or something. You know, I've got I sent the U.S. government invoices worth $395 million, and actually, based on some other stuff, it's up around 2 billion, you know, and that's in lawful money too. That means, what that means is, you know, a 1 ounce, $50, a 1 ounce gold